The notion that a government today can hold back change and deny human potential in order to protect their power is obsolete. In recent years and throughout history, we have seen some governments who have been able to manage change, and others that have not, and have continued to deny the basic dignity of their own people, and have eventually been forced to change. And in many places where change seemed improbable, it very quickly shifted to becoming inevitable because of the collective power of the people. North Korea, however, is a country where change seems impossible. When we think of North Korea, we think of the high politics, mysterious dictators and nuclear weapons, security threats and provocations. This is where some of the biggest and most powerful countries come head to head, all with strong interests and competing priorities. And in the middle is North Korea, the prototypical rogue state that has shown itself to be impervious to external pressure. There have been no real solutions, rather, an ongoing cycle between limited provocations and limited negotiations. It is the one place where the Cold War stalemate never ended. When we look at North Korea from the level of the high politics, it is the same story over and over again, and the situation seems impossible. Over the past 60 years, the North Korean government has created a ruthlessly efficient system of political control, ultimately to ensure its own survival. It is one of the most repressive and closed-off countries in the world, with zero tolerance toward any form of political dissent. This is enforced by a collective punishment system where 3 generations of a person's family are put into a political prison camp for the infraction of a single person. The result is that there is not a single known human rights advocate or activist inside the country. There is no North Korean Aung San Suu Kyi or Liu Xiaobo. However, despite this, if we look at the lives of the ordinary North Korean people, change is happening at the grassroots level, and this is what gives us hope. In fact, from North Korean refugees that our organization has helped, we constantly hear about a remarkable amount of change that has been happening in North Korean society over the last 12 to 15 years. These grassroots changes were triggered by the collapse of a state socialist economy in the 1990s, which led to a famine that killed up to 1 million North Koreans. But out of that tragedy emerged the survival mechanism of grassroots marketization. And it was through these markets that people began to provide for themselves and others with the food and goods that the government could not provide. Today, these markets have become a fundamental part of life for the North Korean people and are gradually transforming North Korean society from below and are creating spaces outside of the regime's complete control. And we believe that it is the quiet growth of these social change phenomena that will eventually lead to a transformation of North Korea. In fact, we've identified 6 reasons why we believe that the North Korean people will achieve their liberty in our lifetime. First, if we look at the long-term picture, there is a simple truth that the current system in North Korea is not creating any economic development. In contrast, over the last 50 years, South Korea has gone from being one of the poorest countries in the world to today being on par with an average EU nation. The difference between North and South Korea's economies is the biggest of any 2 neighboring countries in the world today. As little as 30 years ago, China was poorer than North Korea. Today, North Koreans look across the river at China and are amazed at the bright lights and the development that they see there. This is the result of the North Korean regime's absolute prioritization of political control. Their obsessive attempts to micromanage society has stifled the people's potential, effectively enforcing poverty. But as the rest of the region races ahead, the regime's strategy of trying to deny change becomes increasingly untenable, especially as this divergence becomes increasingly obvious to the North Korean people. This leads to the second factor. The regime has traditionally put massive effort into isolating its people from the outside world so that they could determine the narrative that the North Korean people would believe through extreme indoctrination. The state attempts to control behavior by maintaining a monopoly and the only source of information and ideas inside the country. There is no internet, except for a select group of officials inside the country. And every TV station and newspaper merely serves as a mouthpiece for the regime. But the information blockade is crumbling, and more refugees tell us about watching South Korean dramas and Hollywood films on DVDs and USBs that are being illegally smuggled into the country. And some of them are even making direct contact with their relatives in South Korea through illegal Chinese mobile phones that are being smuggled in and used in the border regions. Despite the regime's best efforts, these information flows will only continue to grow. And as they do so, the regime's narrative about their country and the outside world will become increasingly hollow and powerless. A third crucial but little-known reason for the regime's decreasing power over grassroots society is the explosion of corruption since the collapse of the economy in the 1990s. The regime is essentially broke, and they cannot provide a budget to most government agencies and cannot afford to give proper wages to officials. And with the emergence of market activities and new routes to private wealth, this makes corruption inevitable. North Koreans consistently tell us that in order to get ahead or even just to survive inside North Korea, you have to break the regime's rules, and money enables all of those rules to be broken. Corruption is therefore steadily eroding the regime's control and authority over society. Fourth, there are tens of thousands of North Koreans that have illegally escaped the country and have been resettled in countries like South Korea, the US, and throughout Europe. And thousands more continue to escape every year. These defectors are playing a crucial role in accelerating change by serving as a bridge back into North Korea. It's estimated that 50% of defectors that have made it to South Korea are in touch with their families inside the country, and they do so through those illegal Chinese mobile phones. This is providing a channel of information from the outside world to get into the country, which is then being spread by word of mouth. And more importantly, these defectors are sending remittances back into the country as well. $10 to $15 million is being sent each year into the country through illicit channels and broker networks. This money enables family members to feed themselves, protect their families, bribe local officials, and even invest in entrepreneurial market activities. This bridge role that defectors are playing is having the effect of speeding up the erosion of regime power and increasing the bottom-up pressures for change. Fifth, there is a quiet demographic revolution happening in North Korea. North Koreans born in the 1980s and the 1990s never knew the days under Kim Il-sung when the regime was actually able to provide for the people, and the people had no reason to doubt the state's ideology. Many of the refugees that we work with are part of this new so-called Jangmadang, or market generation, and it's very apparent that they have a different psychological relationship with the state and regime leadership. They don't care much about Japanese colonization or the Korean War, and socialist ideology is increasingly irrelevant to them. They grew up in an era of marketization and self-interest, where the regime seemed more like an obstruction. Their natural youthful curiosity and willingness to take risks also coincided with an unprecedented access to illegal foreign media that hooked many of them on fascinating glimpses of alternative realities and possibilities. The regime's old methods of control through indoctrination and the micromanagement of society is seemingly counterproductive for some of these young North Koreans who are ahead of the curve. And it's only a matter of time before this generation makes up the majority of society. Lastly, a result of many of these changes is that the North Korean people are more connected to each other than ever before, and they depend on each other more than they depend on the state. This is significantly because historically, the regime has relied on the isolation, atomization, and disempowerment of the North Korean people, while also instilling a fear of culture and distrust among the people. As these social changes strengthen the bonds between the people, we have even heard of cases where those individuals who are meant to facilitate government crackdowns are instead helping their neighbors to hide their illegal radios in order to protect them. The more mutual trust and dependence there is, the more people are likely to engage in shared illegal behaviors like watching foreign media and even criticizing the regime to each other, another new trend reported to us by refugees. Collective empowerment becomes possible when these North Korean people feel more loyalty to each other than to the state, and when they are more connected to each other. And the bottom-up pressures for change will become a force to be reckoned with. The result of these grassroots change phenomena is that the people are breaking away from the state, both physically and psychologically. The people used to look to the regime for everything. They looked to the regime for food. Now they get food from the markets. State media was previously the only source and supplier of ideas and narrative, but this is being broken down and replaced by new sources of information. The people previously felt that they owed their loyalty to the party and the regime leadership, but now they are steadily realizing that they can only depend on themselves and their fellow citizens. But this is still North Korea, the most repressive country in the world. We don't expect North Korea to go through a radical change this year or next year. In fact, it's impossible to predict when and how North Korea will change. Perhaps the regime will see this change and will proactively adapt and reform. Or perhaps it may be that they will be forced to change. What we can be sure of, though, is that these trends are here for the long term. They cannot be stopped, and they are irreversible. Our opportunity is to believe in the North Korean people and to pursue ways in which we can help them to accelerate change from the bottom up. For example, we can empower them through increasing the spread of new ideas and technologies, and even provide assistance to North Korean refugees so that they can fulfill their potential as change agents. And if we can do that, then we will see that radical change, even in a country like North Korea, is not impossible. It will be inevitable. Thank you.